Hey everybody, I'm Rich. Most of you probably know my story. I lost 150 pounds over 8 years ago with a primarily plant-based diet. I switched to 100% vegan in September of 2016, and I can't imagine eating any other way. I'm so excited about our guest today, Chef AJ, who is a plant-based chef who also lost a significant amount of weight, and she's here joining us today. And Terry, if you can give a quick intro as well.
Sure. So my name is Terry Gleason. I am a fitness instructor as well as a health coach. And yeah, I kind of discovered this plant-based lovely world about, I'd say a little over 2 years ago. And I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, hearing the right information from the right people. And I've never looked back because I just absolutely love everything about this lifestyle and how beneficial it is to not only my health, but the health of the planet. And it kind of led me into more of being an ethical vegan as well, for the health of the animals as well. So all good stuff. So I'm so happy that you invited me to help you interview Chef AJ, because I'm a huge fan. And yeah, without further ado, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I'm Chef AJ, and I've been following a plant-exclusive diet for 43 years. So they call me the OG. I'm actually in the Vegan Hall of Fame. I have an award on my wall, just like Gandhi. I'm that old, and
Oh, no.
I love to, teach plant-based living to people, whether they want to lose weight or get healthy or save animals or the planet. It doesn't matter. I just want people to eat more plants and, not less animals. I really, truly want them to eat no animals.
Yeah,
I can agree with that.
yeah, me too. So I take it you're an ethical vegan as well.
Well, I was an ethical vegan first, and that's the thing. And, people know me, oh, well, all she cares about is weight loss and food addiction. That's really, I'm 60 years old, and that's really only been about the last 8 years when I lost these 50 pounds and kept them off. I became vegan at 17 purely for ethical reasons. I would have done it sooner if my mom had let me, but I
Yeah,
didn't drive. I didn't really have money. And so, I did the best I could. Pushing as much of the meat. I couldn't even eat meat if it looked like it, like if it had a bone. So for example, you'd never see me eating ribs or fish. And, I could maybe eat like canned tuna because it didn't look like it. So I think I was always wanting to be a vegan, but the minute I left home, I never ate another animal. That was September 1st, 1977. I should say never intentionally. I know there's been a few times at restaurants where things have snuck
yeah.
in and I've
Sometimes you
been
don't know. Yeah,
right. But that's why I really don't eat at restaurants anymore, at least non-vegan restaurants. I don't trust restaurants I just don't. And, a lot of people don't realize this, that, they say, oh, well, we should support these restaurants that aren't vegan for having vegan choices. They cook it in the same pot. So,
I've heard the same thing. Yeah,
you like, I've worked with restaurants to create healthy meals, but when they're cooking it on the grill, that grill had oil and animal products. They don't clean it between, they don't use different pots. So I just don't really trust that I'm getting 100% vegan meal at a non-vegan restaurant. There've been too many mistakes made throughout the years. So if you're going to eat at a restaurant, eat at a vegan restaurant, but better off make the food at home.
I'm so glad you said that because I feel the same way.
Yeah, it's not only healthier when you make it at home, you get more, you pay less, and I understand there's a social aspect, but you know what? Since we've been sheltering, this is like the perfect time to learn to cook and enjoy healthy homemade meals. You'll save money, calories, time, and you can still socialize. You can eat it on Zoom with your friend.
Exactly.
That's great.
Okay, so Terry and I are going to alternate questions. My first question is about your weight loss. Well, you kind of answered that why you started your plant-based journey, but did you have a lot of failed diet attempts? I know I did over the years. And
I yes and no. So I wasn't a perpetual dieter. I pretty much gave up after it didn't work. So in other words, I had two major dieting attempts in my life. The first one, I don't recommend at all. It's called anorexia. It's not very healthy. You end up in a mental hospital, or at least you did back then in the 70s.
yeah,
And
sadly,
you
my
can't,
sister had
yeah.
that.
You can't really sustain it because with anorexia, at some point you either die or they're gonna feed you and you're somehow gonna gain some weight. So I don't recommend that. And that was a very extreme form of dieting, and that didn't work out. And that's when I actually got up to. It's really interesting because before I became anorexic, I was always overweight. At 5'6", I was, I was probably about 160, 165. That was my whatever you want to say, set weight. I mean, it was still obese, but I was able to maintain that. I was actually that weight when I was 11 and I was only 5 feet tall. So that was a weight I was able to maintain, eating pretty much whatever crap I want. You know, I was vegan and everything like that. But after becoming anorexic, you know, I became bulimic, which is, I don't want to say worse, they're both bad, but I literally could not stop eating. And that's when I got up to almost 200 pounds. And that was really freaking me out because my mom was morbidly obese and my dad was normal weight. And so, you know, the big predisposition there to end up like her, you know, and I remember Dr. Goldhammer saying to me, you know, if you hadn't become vegan at 17, you probably would have ended up as heavy as your mom. So
Wow.
yeah, that was scary.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was. And Terry?
Thank you so much for sharing all that information. I think a lot of people can relate, but I think it also is a little bit maybe just embarrassing to kind of admit these things that we have around food, because food is just food. It's part of our day. We shouldn't have problems with food. And the more I learn about specifically more plant-based diet and just wellness in general, and how these foods that maybe we thought were healthy that might even be on our US food guide are very, very addictive. And they're very, very hard to eat in moderation or eat in small amounts. And then they end up maybe making us overweight, which don't understand why we're overweight because we're eating these healthy foods. And it's kind of like a cycle. So thank you so much for bringing attention to that. I think it's going to be really important for some of our viewers to see. So actually, maybe along that line, I definitely hear a lot. I mean, I definitely have fell victim to diet culture for literally at least 15 years of my life that I can like think of. And I probably had it sprinkled around before that. And it kind of just like in memory lasted for a good like chunk of my 20s, kind of like into college and so forth. You know, and I was always so worried about like calories and focus on sugar-free and carb-free and low fat and high protein, or all these little buzzwords. You know, in some of the programs that you do for your clients and for people who that you help, do you ever feel like you have to have your clients worry about that kind of stuff? Do people need to worry about calories and counting and counting macronutrients? And, you know, give us some information about how you kind of work with your clients in your program.
Well, sure. And first I want to go back to something that you said a bit ago, which is we shouldn't have these problems around food. So let's define what food is, because we don't have eating disorders around food. You can't go to any third world country and find anorexia or bulimia because they're eating whole plant foods, unprocessed foods. When foods are processed, for many people, they're more drug-like than food-like. So people are not in Arugula Anonymous. They're not overweight or obese from potatoes or sweet potatoes or rice or beans. The problem comes with the processing of food. Sugar and flour go through the same refining process as drugs and alcohol. And a certain segment of the population are very sensitive to the effects of the processing of food. It's sort of like there are people that can drink alcohol and not become an alcoholic, whether they drink a little or a lot. But there are some people from whom the old saying goes, one drink, one drunk. And so when you understand what is food, if you eat food, then there is no need to weigh and measure your food or count calories, carbs, points, or macros. When you understand what it is you're supposed to eat, you don't have to worry about when you eat, why you eat, or really how much you eat. If you're eating whole foods, that means foods that are from a plant that have not yet been processed, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes. You really can eat ad libitum when you're eating that. Now, there is one small caveat for some people, and I think this is mostly women that have been overweight and maybe are menopausal or hypothyroid. Some people do not do as well with a large amount of fat. So in other words, there are people, and you see this a lot in males and athletes, they can eat, you know, lots of peanut butter, nuts, seeds, avocado, and not only not gain weight, maybe even lose weight. But not all women can do that. That's why there is a difference between health food and healthy food. Nuts, seeds, and avocado are very healthy food. But for somebody struggling with weight, eating those ad libitum are not always going to facilitate weight loss. So I say to people, I have this thing on the back of my book. It's a little calorie density chart, and it says,
I love that chart.
Line. Thank you. So fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, no, as much as you want. But when you go to the right of the red line, nuts, seeds, and avocados, most people can't, at least people struggling with weight, can't eat as much as they want. So that's what we want to monitor. Maybe an ounce of nuts or seeds a day, or believe it or not, a serving of avocado, according to the Avocado Commission, is a fifth of an avocado. So the healthy fats often have to be at least paid attention to, at least by the women that I've worked with. And then again, you know, Ezekiel bread, it may be salt-free and sprouted, and it may not be an unhealthy food. You might be able to reverse your heart disease eating it, but it's calorically dense. You can't defy the laws of thermodynamics. So bread is 3 times as calorically dense as the whole grain that it came from. So you can eat a lot more brown rice than you can a cake or a bread or a cracker made from that whole grain. Also, what people forget is when you process food, you take away not only some of the nutrients and the fiber, but you also eliminate the water. And if you want to feel full, especially if your goal is weight loss, to feel full on fewer calories, you've got to have the fiber and the water intact in the whole food. Bread does not have well, bread has no water.
Yeah.
It's very, and things like that. So people have to pay attention to that. Say, well, God, I'm eating, almond butter, with no added salt or sugar on Ezekiel bread, and I can't lose weight. Well, the caloric density of that is well, the nut butter is like 3,200 calories a pound. The bread is 1,500. Well, that's why. So people have to know the difference between health food and healthy food and food that's favorable for weight loss.
Awesome. Yeah, I love all those answers. And actually, Richard, if you don't mind, maybe I'll just add my little follow-up question, because it goes along kind of the same that you just answered. I hear the word moderation a lot. So I think, I don't know if people use it as an excuse to eat crappy food. So what are your thoughts on the term moderation? So whether it is, meat, dairy, eggs, oil, whatever, things that you suggest people don't eat, or, that's not a whole food, where do you see those fitting in moderation? If somebody asks.
Well, here's the thing. It's just this is the thing. It depends on the person, and you have to know yourself. Moderation, I don't see a lot of people for whom it works. If moderation worked, why do we have, I think it's 40% of our population now obese and something like 90% also overweight? Clearly, for most of these people, moderation isn't working. But I will tell you, there is a group of people for whom moderation has never worked, and those people are the addicts. So if you have food addiction, which is really a terrible name for a disease, it's refined food addiction, it's the processed foods, the sugar, flours, and alcohol, then moderation doesn't work for you. There's an old saying, it's far easier to suppress the first desire than to try to satisfy all that follows. That was Benjamin Franklin in the, I forget what, 18th or 17th century, whenever he lived. So if you're somebody that is sensitive to the effects of these foods, moderation is never going to work for you. Eating less makes as much sense as breathing less. You can do it for a little bit. That's why these weighing and measuring programs and Weight Watchers, they will work in the short term for weight loss, but most people cannot sustain moderation. If they could have, they would have, and they wouldn't be overweight in the first place.
Yeah,
I love it.
personally,
Great answer.
I never could stand the moderation talk when people give it to me, because first of all, I don't want to go down that road of being obese again. And second of all, that would mean that it's okay to eat animal products, which I don't think, because I'm ethical vegan now. And I just don't believe in that. So I can't stand when people say everything moderation.
Dr. Esselstyn says moderation kills.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear about your Secrets of Ultimate Weight Loss book. What is the #1 tip you can provide our viewers to how to sustainably lose weight?
#1 tip is, whether you learn it from my book or YouTube or Pritikin's book, the #1 tip is calorie density. Calorie density isn't counting calories. You don't have to memorize how many calories in a half a cup of rice or a cup of blueberries. You just have to know the average calorie density of a few food groups, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes specifically. And if you eat at an average calorie density of about, I believe it's 567 calories per pound per day, you cannot gain weight, you cannot be overweight, and you will lose weight if you keep your calorie density. That calorie density, by the way, means calories per pound of food. And food varies in calorie density by a 40-fold factor. So a pound of vegetables is 100 calories. A pound of olive oil is 4,000 calories. And hopefully nobody would eat a pound of olive oil, but I sure know a lot of people that have eaten a pound of nuts in a sitting, and those are 3,200 calories. So for the same amount of calories, say in a tablespoon of olive oil, you could have 2 pounds of zucchini. And so when you understand calorie density, you can actually eat more food and weigh much less, because we need a certain amount of food per day to feel satisfied, to activate our stretch receptors. This is from the work of Dr. Barbara Rolls at Penn State University, where she studies human eating behavior. She's written a series of books on calorie density called Volumetrics. She discovered that most people eat about 3 to 5 pounds of food per day. That's what we need to feel full and satisfied. Well, so what most people do when they go on a diet is they eat less food, which is a tragic mistake, because people are not overweight because they ate too much food. It's because they eat too many calories. And so when you change the calorie density of the food you eat, you can eat not only as much food as you were eating before to feel full and satisfied, but possibly even more because you're eating foods of a lower caloric density. Unfortunately, most Americans eat foods of a much higher caloric density. Our ancestors, according to Dr. Doug Lisle, evolved at a calorie density of about 700 calories per pound. And that included them eating a little bit of animal products and a little bit of honey. But most people are eating far to the left of the red line. They're eating to the right of the red line. And again, eating things like sugar, 1,800 calories a pound, chocolate, 2,500 calories a pound, bread, 1,500 calories a pound, you know, crackers and pretzels and things like that, 1,800 calories a pound. Oil, especially, that's, I mean, the easiest way to lose weight, if you just stop oil. There's no reason. You don't need it. If you feel you need fat, then eat nuts, seeds, avocados, whole food fats, but no, only cars need oil. Nobody needs oil. And that's one of the biggest secrets. And that's when restaurant eating is going to come into place, because people think they're getting an oil-free meal at a restaurant because they say no oil. No, you're not. Do you think that they really, when they're steaming your vegetables or your pasta, I've worked in a restaurant, they don't throw out the water that had the oil and the salt in it to now boil yours. They don't. Those things are rolling all day. They don't wipe off the grill when they're making your tofu patty or whatever. You cannot get an oil-free meal at a restaurant. I'm sorry. You're fooling yourself if you think you are. I mean, maybe a dry salad, maybe. And even a lot of times you think a baked potato, they've rubbed the outside in oil before they baked it. So, you know, that's what I know Dr. Esselstyn says, say I'm deathly allergic. But the thing is most food in restaurants isn't made to order. It's prepped well in advance by somebody that is not really caring so much about your dietary, situations. So if you really, it's been interesting with the sheltering, people that have never been able to lose weight have told me, well, gosh, now that I'm not going to restaurants, I'm finally losing weight. Yeah. You can't control for that extra oil that's in restaurant food. Oil slips under the radar, undetected by the mechanisms of satiety. And they've done studies where they've given people the exact same meal that they make at home, like say a pasta primavera with some vegetables and a marinara sauce, or a restaurant version where there's oil in the sauce and in the pasta and maybe butter on the vegetables. And there's a 500 calorie difference. People couldn't detect any more fullness from the 500 calories of oil. It has no fiber, so it can't activate the stretch receptor, has no nutrients, can't activate the nutrient receptors. And people just don't realize how much fat and calories they're getting from a restaurant meal. I interviewed Dr. Susan Roberts at Tufts once, and her lab is right next to a bunch of restaurants. And she said that whatever restaurants say the calories, and they're way off. She goes, when people eat at restaurants, they're eating so many more calories than they ever anticipated. She said, usually at least 500 more that they don't compensate for, the next day. So really, that's another tip is if you're struggling, stay out of the restaurants.
I totally agree.
Totally agree.
Yeah. I could tell stories too about restaurants, but I'll save that for another time because I used to work at a few fast food places and they really don't care.
They really don't. I mean, I think if people saw what really went on behind the scenes, very few people would eat at restaurants. I almost never do. And if I do, it has to be one like a poke bowl restaurant where everything's out in front. Those are the only restaurants I'll eat at where I'm seeing it right in front of me. And even then, you don't know. They did a survey once, anonymous survey, and I don't remember the number. I want to say 87%. I could be wrong. We'll have to Google this. But the preponderance of people that work at restaurants that went to the restroom for number one and number two that didn't even wash their hands.
Oh, I believe it.
Unbelievable. And that's who's prepping your food, people.
Well, there's always signs that they have to wash their hands. You mean they don't?
No. When they were surveyed anonymously, they said, no, I do not wash my hands after using the restroom.
My God. Yep. Wow.
True. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I'm not a big restaurant eater to begin with, and not because I'm trying to eat healthy or any which way. So, but that makes me even less of a restaurant eater at this point. So, oh my goodness. So you were kind of mentioning the word addiction, food addictions, and just remind me how you put it. It's not a food addiction. You're addicted to
refined food addiction. And again, the doctors that are really working on this think it's a terrible name. They're thinking maybe calling it a dopamine deficiency disorder. But right now it's not in the DSM. So it's not even something that's recognized. But you can't be addicted to food and eating. You have to eat to live. But you can be, or there is an addictive-like process for some people with these processed foods, but particularly sugar and flour that go through the same refining process as drugs and alcohol. So people don't have problems with beets, but they have problems when the fiber is stripped and the water is removed and the nutrients are removed. And people generally don't have, some people might, but most people don't have problems eating whole grains, but when it's put into flour, it does. Because part of it is you've increased the caloric density, so it's higher glycemic. And again, not everybody has this problem. That's why, again, it's going back to the model of alcoholism. I personally don't drink alcohol. I don't know if I could drink a little or a lot because I never wanted to get into that. But people that drink alcohol, I don't think they would say to somebody they know to be an alcoholic for sure, say, well, why can't you just drink moderately like me? What's wrong with you? Yet people, and this is what I see in the plant-based world, because I'm often criticized for being too extreme. I'm only extreme for me. I really don't care what anybody else eats. I mean, I would prefer to be vegan, but if you can eat sugar, flour, I don't really care, honestly, unless, you've paid me and you're my client. But don't respect the fact that people are different, and that for some of us, even the smallest amount of sugar or flour in a recipe, our brains just light up like, like a Christmas tree, and we just can't stop eating. And the people that don't have this, they don't acknowledge that it's real in others. And to me, that would be like somebody, if you are somebody that can drink alcohol moderately, would you really say to somebody you knew to be an alcoholic, well, what's wrong with you? Why can't you just have a smaller amount, or push yourself away from the bar? Because they don't have it, they assume that, I don't know if we're faking or that it's not real, but it is real for those. And depending on which doctor you talk to, it's something like 1 in 7 people or 17%. So obviously there's more people that can eat these things without feeling it has this addictive like component. But the reality is even people that can manage their weight and not have a lifestyle disease, these are still very pleasure trap type foods. They still have this lure that pulls people in, and for a lot of people, it's hard to stop once we start. So we just don't start.
Yeah, I can 100% relate. My husband and I just did this. We read a book called Fiber Fuel that just came out about gut health, and we were like, all right, let's do this 4-week Fiber Fuel challenge just to try something, whatever. And it really kept us on that whole food, plant-based, eating whole foods, not eating our vegan junk food that we sometimes slip in. And wouldn't you know, it felt fantastic. Then at the end of the 4 weeks, we're kind of just like, all right, don't really have a guide anymore. We just kind of, ate out a little bit, had some vegan junk food here and there. When I say vegan junk food, it's like the meat alternative burgers and things like that. And I remember not feeling so well. I'm like, oh, I'm just really tired today. I wonder why. Like, obviously I'm tired and I don't feel good because I wasn't eating the foods that I was eating for the past 4 weeks that were making me feel amazing. So if anybody is wondering if they have a food addiction or a refined food addiction, how could they go about maybe figuring that out?
Well, let me, there are a lot of tests.
I also had a follow-up question, which is similar to Terry's. What are your thoughts on orthorexia that they try to make a disease?
Well, I think that's something they call every vegan. You watch these YouTube channels of these people that are always bashing the vegan diet. I think that if there is a thing, orthorexia, there's usually a reason. I think that people, if they knew your story or my story, how we suffered, they might not judge us so harshly, but they haven't, because they can't feel in our brain, or they've never walked in our shoes. So are there people that are probably obsessive about their health? Probably, but is that really a bad thing? Who are they hurting? Number one. And number two, I think it's mostly vegan bashing, because it's usually the people that tell people they're orthorexics are either people that just can't do the vegan diet for whatever reason, or can't do a healthy version. So, somebody's doing a good job. Well, let's just bash them, because,
criticize them. Yep.
Yeah, but I was looking in my book, because I actually do have a quiz for food addiction that I wrote, and there's other ones. There's I think Yale has a very famous one you can Google online. So this is my little 10-question quiz that I wrote in my book, and it said, so how do you know if you have a problem with a particular type of food or drink? Please ask yourself these 10 questions and answer as honestly as possible. Number 1, do you absolutely have to consume it daily or perhaps even several times a day? Number 2, do you feel bad if you're unable to get your fix? Number 3, do you think about it often and can't wait until you're able to consume it again, even if you've just had it? Number 4, is it difficult for you to moderate your use of it? Number 5, do you often consume more of it than you intended to? Number 6, do you often feel shame or regret after consuming it? Number 7, do you have physical or emotional withdrawal symptoms when you try to abstain from it? Number 8, is it difficult for you to get through even a single day without consuming this substance? Number 9, does abstaining from it result in any physical or emotional discomfort? And number 10, does the mere thought of abstaining from it bring on strong emotions such as anxiety, sadness, anger, or grief? So I feel like if you answered yes to any of these questions, you may be suffering from an addiction. Right now, food addiction is largely self-diagnosed. So,
Yeah.
Good. Thank you for that.
yeah. So, with sweet potatoes, the answer is no. But when I think of certain foods like Coke Slurpees that I used to enjoy every day for breakfast, or Dr. Pepper, or even things like peanut butter or chocolate, or, it's like, yes, 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 yes,
Yep. Yeah, it's almost like when we hear, there's an E. coli breakout with lettuce. It's like, oh, let's not eat romaine lettuce that's okay. I can never eat romaine lettuce again and be fine. But God forbid there's something, maybe a meat packaging plant. And people will kind of ignore that. And I think that's kind of pretty gross.
Yeah.
Well, the E. coli would have not happened if it wasn't for the poop of the cow in the first place. It's not the vegetable. People, that's the thing. It's like, people wake up. What do you think caused this pandemic? Eating animals. The E. coli isn't from the vegetables, from the poop from the cow. That's where it comes from.
Richard, do you have your face mask?
I wish I had it with me, but I wear a mask probably that says plants don't cause pandemics.
Oh, I love it. My face mask says vegan since 1977.
Love it.
I love it. I got to get a cool one. I don't have one.
It's really cool.
I have one. I just, it's not a cool one.
So there's this company that's making face masks and scarves so you can match your dog when you go out.
Oh, how cute.
Isn't that cool?
Very cute. Very cute. All right. I'll get my two nice watermelon one. Cute.
Just as a side note, too, Dr. Greger at nutritionfacts.org, they sent me an email. They're selling masks today.
Nice.
For, healthy eating. You'll have to check it out. Okay, so I'm not sure where it is next, but my next question was, did it take you a while to learn how to cook without oil?
Actually it didn't. And it's surprisingly easy. And I know people that have never done it think like, oh my God, you can't cook without oil. How do you do it? You don't use oil, because think about it. What's so special about oil? It's a liquid. So why couldn't you use another liquid? So for sauteing, you can use broth, you can use water, you could use fruit or vegetable juice. So there's nothing magical or special about oil, unless of course it's to fry, in which case we probably shouldn't be frying unless it's in an air fryer. So no, and actually I was a pastry chef at a restaurant for 5 years, and baking without oil is actually easy, because what oil provided in a baked recipe was the moisture, which you can get from pureed pumpkin or prunes, prune butter or date paste or pumpkin or banana, applesauce. There's so many ways, bananas, that you could get that same kind of moisture that oil was doing. So it really wasn't hard, but in the mind of the person that's never cooked without it, or people say, well, how do I roast vegetables without oil? You just put them on a tray and you roast them. You don't, and that will save the people the most calories. And when I've worked with restaurants to take the oil out, the chefs were always kind of snooty at first, but then when they realized that there was no difference in the taste, especially in things like soups, and then they realized as an executive chef, they had to save money, and how much money they were saving not using oil. They changed their tune, but it's not their fault, because just like doctors aren't taught nutrition in medical schools, chefs aren't really taught how to cook without oil in culinary school. So yeah, I think of oil, sugar, and salt. Oil is probably the easiest of the three elements of the evil trinity to do without.
Yeah, especially if you're not eating processed foods, right? Like if you're literally just cooking yourself, you can control it. If any kind of processed food is going to have oil on it, so that's hard to.
Oil, sugar, salt. That's a different definition of processed food. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. Wow. All right. So obviously we're focusing a lot about weight loss because that's kind of your expertise and what you focus on. what would you say to someone who thinks, well, I'm just overweight because my family's overweight. My mom's overweight,
Yeah,
my dad's overweight, so of course I'm overweight, or I just have curves. Like maybe even someone not really overweight, but someone on the bigger side, I just have curves. This is just the way I am. Every shape is beautiful. Why should I have to lose weight?
And I used to say I had big bones. That's why I was so
I had big
I used to
bones,
tell
yeah.
people that I wasn't overweight, that I was under height. That was my line. But first of all, curves are beautiful, and especially in certain cultures. Like I have a friend of a different culture that thinks I look terrible. Like who would ever go after a bony ass lady like me, as he says. So that's one thing that there's going, regardless of people's weights, there's going to be different body types, and even if we all ate the same diet, we wouldn't all end up the same weight. There are going to be people that are curvier and people that are more slender. That's just the way it is. And if you're happy with your weight, who am I or anybody else to tell you to lose weight? Now, if you have a health issue, for example, and if you truly are overweight, we know, at least I know now from interviewing, I think close to 75 doctors now for the summit that I host called The Truth About Weight Loss, that there really is no such thing as health at every size. Now, we don't shame or blame. You don't treat people badly because they're overweight. But you can't really just say to them, and Dr. Furman is very vocal about this. You can't just say, well, it's fine, just keep it. I mean, you can if you want, but the fact is they don't realize that they are more predisposed to everything, including the pandemic, when they're carrying excess body weight. And so if somebody wishes to lose weight, this is something we can help them with. But as far as their family, genetics loads the gun. It's your lifestyle that pulls the trigger. And so I love how the cardiologist in Houston, who's plant-based, Dr. Baxter Montgomery, says it's not the genes that are hereditary, it's the recipes. So even if you have the same genes as your family, if you didn't eat the same food that caused them to be overweight, you probably wouldn't be overweight either. And so again, it comes down to the environment. And when you change the environment, you can change, the outcome. And there's an amazing new field, epigenetics, where when you change what you eat, you can actually change your genetic expression, so that even if you have a strong family history of cancers and things like that, that doesn't mean you have to go down that road. So, but you're right, there's a thing called the obesity contagion, where Dr. Ornish talks about this, how you're more likely to be overweight or obese if your friend's friend is overweight or obese than even your own family. And this is where that social aspect comes in. And that's why the company you keep, if you're struggling with a lifestyle disease or wanting to lose weight, it's going to be very, very important. So again, curves are great. And if you're happy with your weight, I've never told anybody they should or need. I mean, I told my mom when I was little, she was really heavy, but you learn pretty quickly. You don't make comments on people's appearance. And, I get attacked the other way now. It's almost, I'm just getting really tired of it, because when I was fat, I've been on YouTube for 10 years, and I've been thin now for how many years? About 7 of those. And at first it was like, if the vegan diet's so good, why are you so fat? And it's now, she's orthorexic, anorexic.
You can't win either way.
Yeah, no, you can't. And not if you're out in the public. In the public, people don't. I haven't had anybody ever come up to me on the street and say, "Oh my God, you're so thin, I could snap you like a twig." But on YouTube and social media, people, they're generally anonymous too. They never show their picture, But it is what it is. And some doctors say it's just jealousy or whatever. But it's but see, I don't see why, if it's not right to comment on somebody's weight one way, why is it okay to do it the other way? But
Exactly.
Yeah, because you're promoting something that works that isn't convenient for a lot of people. So it's nice to, I think your natural reaction of someone is to find something wrong with it, because it can't be that good, because maybe they can't do it or don't feel like they can do it. So it has to be something wrong with it. So
absolutely.
I've learned a lot about psychology. I mean, just the human nature of psychology is crazy with this whole diet thing. And we're like the only species on Earth, actually. Maybe Doug Lyle, someone I went to a workshop and said there's only 3 species on Earth that are deal with obesity: humans, dogs, and cats. And look where they're all living.
And that's what, and Dr. Lyle is the one that said it. It's the humans and the pets that they're in charge of, and that's the only ones of the millions of species.
Yeah.
Because the only one that's eating processed food. It's the only one that's not eating the food that they were designed to eat.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
What are some of your thoughts on the latest rage seems to be about keto diets, which I'm not a fan of. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are.
Well, I mean, come on, people. I mean, first of all, they will have health benefits in the short term. If somebody's diabetic or obese, they're going to lose weight very quickly. But just because you have a great outcome in the short term doesn't mean you're going to be able to maintain it in the long term. And how many people can really stay on an all fat and meat diet or an all meat diet? I don't know anybody, because we're designed to eat carbohydrates, not sugar and flour carbohydrates, but complex carbohydrates like potatoes, rice, beans, fruits, and vegetables. And that's what we're supposed to eat like 80% of our calories from. They're eating like no calories from them. It's not the diet that they're meant to eat. And yes, there might be some short-term health benefits, but all the doctors I've interviewed said that they're actually mortgaging their health in the long term. And even Walt Willett, who's not a vegan, but he's vegan friendly and very well known, says that keto is a very, very selfish diet, because even if it were healthy, which it isn't, it's not sustainable on a planet with, what do we have, 8 billion people? I mean, where are we going to get the meat for everybody? You know, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It bothers me when people are selfish, and most people are, because if they weren't, they would not eat animals.
Yeah. Well, if I hear good news, I feel like if the human hears good news about their bad habits, that's exactly where we kind of want to go, right? Yeah. Because you could do a vegan keto, and I've told people that. Okay, if you're so wanting to do keto and you think that's the best for your body, it's really just measuring the macronutrients and making sure you have the amount of macronutrients that you need, amount of protein, amount of carbohydrates, amount of fat. You can get that from plant-based foods, but no.
They want to eat animals. Yeah, I never understood this desire for animal flesh, but I think people think they still think they need it. Where are they going to get the? I mean, you know, after 43 years, you hear, where are you going to get your protein one more time? You want to like scream. Oh my God! It's like, where do you get your fiber, huh? Because that's more important, and you're not getting any from that meat.
Yeah. And I tend to feel the people who maybe criticize it the most are unfortunately the most unhealthy. I mean, I'm just thinking that the people in my kind of circle that tend to criticize it are usually the most unhealthy. So it is more of a psychology, kind of a defensive mechanism that I think it is.
It's a status thing. Dr. Lyle talks about this, and I believe it's maybe chapter 4 of The Pleasure Trap, getting along without going along. When you do something that's really great, being vegan is not only great for your health, it's superior for your health, the planet, the animals. Then all of a sudden these people, they know what they're doing isn't right on some level. So guess what? They got to attack you. And it's because they can't. And part of it too, I think it's also an addiction, because meat and dairy products especially are very addictive to the people that consume them. Just like for people like me, sugar and flour, for them, meat and dairy is the same way. They can't imagine not only a life without them, but even a day without them, let alone a meal without animal flesh.
Yeah, I think before I became plant-based, or actually I went vegetarian first, because I saw I was very into dog rescue, and then I saw a sign that said, "Why love one but eat the other?" And it was a picture of like a pit bull, which I love pit bulls. I have 2 of them, and a cow. And I'm like, I never thought of it that way. So I just decided to go vegetarian. So, you know, for me, like, I didn't want to eat those foods. No one told me not to. So I think it was a little bit easier when it was kind of like my choice. But I think when someone's told, that's a little bit harder too. But either way,
you know, when I was 17, somebody said, I was a veterinarian who said, how can you love animals called pets and then eat animals called dinner? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I mean, it just like was duh. But people have to wake up, I guess, at their own time. Unfortunately, I don't know if the planet's going to be around long enough for most of the people to wake up.
Sadly.
Yeah.
Terry, I think, your turn.
Me?
Yeah.
Well, good. Let's turn it to a positive note. During this whole time, I know you remember. You're making me laugh so much too. In between, kind of this like more really serious information. Do you have a background in comedy, correct?
Oh yeah, I mean, I still do it. I haven't always merged the 2 worlds together because, but lately I have. So I've always enjoyed performing comedy, especially improv comedy, but I never quite, did it as a career. I kind of dabbled in it. I was on shows though, in my 20s and 30s. Actually, I kind of kept it up a little bit. I was actually on The Tonight Show, actually with multiple hosts. I was on, I think, 4 times. Only one of the appearances is available on YouTube, but I never quite broke it it broke into it the big time, but I kind of always was interested in it. So I stay in comedy classes. I still perform from time to time. I think it just helps me be a better public speaker when I have to speak, because as they say that the number one fear is public speaking. Let me tell you, stand-up comedy is way harder than giving a lecture or giving a eulogy. And if you can do stand-up, you can do anything. So, I like to, challenge myself, because stand-up has never stopped being scary. I can go on that cruise, the vegan cruise, and speak to 2,000 people and not get nervous. But man, every time you do stand-up, because you just don't know, there's a presupposition that you're supposed to be funny. If I talk about calorie density and I make people laugh, it's a bonus, but they're not expecting, they didn't pay the money to come on, lady,
laugh.
Right. So but it is fun. But I actually prefer what's called improv, because you're working with a troupe and somebody else has your back. So for some reason, what you said maybe didn't land, somebody's going to rescue you. Whereas stand-up, it's you and a microphone and a bunch of people drinking alcohol, and good luck with that.
I was just curious, because I know the workshop there, the immersion that Richard and I went to in New York when you were there. I'm like, wow, she's really funny.
Oh, thank you. Well, I also, because at the end of the day, really what I am is a teacher, whatever I'm teaching, whether it's cooking or calorie density. And I have learned from the teachers that I've admired is that if people zone out if things are boring, and things can be really interesting, but if by keeping it, that's why when I used to teach, I always would do song parodies, because it was unexpected. People didn't expect a chef to be singing or telling jokes. They would stay engaged so that I could really deliver the information that I wanted to deliver, and make it fun for people, and also make it fun for me, because calorie density can be pretty boring after a while. So you want to, wake up your audience, and it's fun. I think people like to laugh. It's therapeutic, and I don't, that's why I think one of the reasons Dr. Greger is so beloved is because he's so funny.
Oh,
love him, yeah.
Dr. Furman too. They're both.
Oh, Dr. Furman has a very funny sense of humor, and sometimes So I think people like that. I think people like when people are funny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, me too. My next question is a two-part question. I have one about what's your favorite dessert recipe, and also what is your go-to spice, the one spice that you love?
So I'll answer the second question first, because off the top of my head, I say this a lot. It's smoked paprika, and that's so different than the Hungarian paprika. I don't know what it is about smoking spices, but it's so good, and especially because I choose not to eat salt. There's something about smoked paprika that's just, I love the way it smells. I love the way it tastes. It's not a spicy spice, but I have this joke that, when I'm teaching cooking, like hands-on cooking at a spa called Rancho La Puerta, and people are like, oh, this is salt-free cooking, it's no good. I'm like, smoked paprika fixes everything. So I'd have to say it's smoked paprika. And my favorite dessert recipe, it's so funny, because it just so happens I'm writing a dessert cookbook right now. Sweetened. Yeah. So I'm probably the new carrot cake recipe, the newer version that I just created. Right now, it's because there's no sugar or flour, or it's really low fat. There's no nuts. It's really good. I got to serve it to Dr. Goldhammer, and he gave it a thumbs up. So it's usually the thing that I just created, because I'm also working on a lemon meringue pie and some blueberry lemon squares. So it's always whatever I just created. But since the last thing I ate and made was a carrot cake, a double frosted cake, I'm going to say that one.
Oh, can't wait to check it out.
Yeah, definitely can't wait to check that out.
Terry, I think it's your turn next.
All right. So I'm in the health and fitness field, and I think what brought me into nutrition is kind of just seeing, I see all these people, they exercise a lot, and they're still not, they're still overweight, or they're still unhealthy. And for me, growing up, I just thought exercise was the main thing to be healthy. If you don't want to be overweight, just make sure you're exercising enough. The reason we have obesity in this country at such a higher rate is because we're not moving enough. And I think that's just kind of what I thought, because I was the type of person that I pretty much ate whatever I wanted as a kid. I had 2 Domino's pizzas and a bag of Doritos, and I was fine, quote unquote fine. At least when I could get away with it, in a sense. So I think that's kind of just was ingrained in my head, that we're just not exercising enough. Where do you, now I know completely different, that it's the food. It's not really how much you're exercising per se, but where would you see exercise kind of fit into weight loss? And maybe some other people might think that exercise is the main thing because, you know, their friend eats the same diet and they're skinny and you know, they just don't exercise enough. So what would you kind of say about exercise?
Well, I was lucky that I got to prove this hypothesis myself. And this was before a very famous article came out in the Scientific American Journal, which basically said that exercise contributes almost negligibly to weight loss.
Wow.
Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. It's very important.
Of course, yeah.
Exercise is important for brain health, bone health, immunity, better sleep, self-esteem especially. But where weight loss is, it's very insignificant. Now, with weight management, I think it becomes more important, but I lost almost all my weight without exercise. And it wasn't because I was trying to prove anything, but when I really got serious about my weight loss journey, it was because I was in a wheelchair. I had broken my knee and gained even more weight the 3 months I was in a wheelchair. I couldn't exercise and my knee had such an internal derangement. It was a long time before I could not only walk, but do anything. So I was still able to lose probably 47 of the 50 pounds that I've lost without any exercise. Now I do exercise now, but I exercise for different reasons. I exercise primarily for mental health because there is nothing better for anxiety, depression, mood than exercise. And it's got to be done, unfortunately, just like taking an antidepressant pill. If you're on it, you take it every morning. You got to do it every day. I think where exercise can come in with weight loss is that it improves your self-esteem. It makes you feel better about yourself. And if you exercise in the morning, regardless of your weight, you're going to have more ability to stick to a healthy eating plan because you did something so good for yourself. You know, people can eat well all day and usually often people undereat because they think if I eat less, I'll lose weight faster, which is always a mistake. And then they can blow it after dinner with a 2,000 calorie binge, but you can't undo the effect of having exercised. So exercise is not for weight loss, but it's very good, but you know, you don't have to do it because there have been times in my life where just being on jobs or whatever, I've had to go for 5 weeks without exercise. If I had to depend on exercise for weight loss, I would never be able to be this way. Also, I wish you would ask that because I actually have this really interesting calendar that was from many years ago, but it shows exactly how much you have to exercise, like to eat an Oreo, to eat a donut, to eat a chocolate bar, and you can't. It's just,
I hate that.
You can't do it.
Yeah, and I'm guilty of saying those things. And now when I teach, I'm very conscious that I don't say, you know, it's bikini season coming up, let's exercise, or let's exercise so we can get that beer afterwards. Or, you know, I'm very conscious of not saying those things because I know they're not true and they feed into the idea that the only reason we're exercising is so we can eat crappy food. So I'm very conscious of that. And I know other people joke about it and it's just kind of like a funny off the cuff thing, but I think it definitely adds to a culture of, well, we just exercise so we can eat more crappy food. And hopefully it balances out at the end of the day, which is not true.
It doesn't.
So,
and I believe it was Dr. Furman who says you can't outrun your mouth.
No. Yeah, you definitely can't.
Yep.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, when I did my weight loss journey, I did exercise, probably a little too hard, but it was the calories. I know that it was the calories that helped melt the weight away. So it was 120 pounds in the first year.
Wow, that's amazing. That's what I weigh now. It's like you lost me.
Yeah.
My friend Anthony Masello, you probably remember him from
Absolutely.
Yeah, he is another one. He lost 160 pounds without any exercise at all. So there's proof right there.
Yeah, you don't need it, but you don't need it for weight loss, but you do need it for health. Exactly. And you know, think about it. Sometimes I'm sure all of you guys know people that are so overweight that right now they cannot exercise. I mean, they might be able to go into a pool and do some gentle walking. So do we tell them, oh, well, just forget about weight loss until you can exercise? No, it's the food, it's the food, it's the food, but do what you can within the limitations that you might have right now. Just start somewhere. But yeah, and also a lot of times people, you know, especially, you know, you see these shows like The Biggest Losers, they're doing things that are not right for the body at the weight they're in. They could injure themselves too. They're working too hard for their bones and joints right now. That's why, especially people that have quite a bit of weight, you know, the pool is the best because you're weightless in the pool.
Very true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Terry, do you have another question? Because I have one more.
Those are all my questions. So go ahead, Richard. You can end it up.
My next question is about what do you think is a great substitute for people who are addicted to cheese? That was one of my things that was tough to give up.
Well, so You know, I was very fortunate that I was allergic to dairy, so cheese wasn't my thing. It was more like, you know,
You're
the sugar
lucky.
fat combination. So, and meat wasn't my thing. So the hardest thing for me to give up were the treats, you know, desserts, candies, cakes, cookies, pies, and ice cream. But I hear this from a lot of people, and even people I interview, like Howard Lyman once said, you know, it was harder to give up cheese than it was to quit smoking. So I would suggest sometimes, if people know why they're doing something and they have a compelling reason, it's easier. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it's easier to do it. Dr. Rosanne Alviera calls this the why that makes you cry. And so there's a couple of great books specifically on dairy addiction. Well, actually 3. Dr. Barnard wrote them all. One is Breaking the Food Seduction. One is The Cheese Trap, and one is Your Body in Balance. And so when people, I think, read these books, one or all of them, and they understand how deleterious dairy is because of all the things that you could consume. When I work with people, that's the first thing I want people to give up. A lot of people say, well, I'm a vegetarian for ethical reasons. Well, no, you're not if you eat dairy, because there's nobody treated worse than dairy cows. But even from a health standpoint, not that I want people to eat meat, but they'd probably be better off eating a little meat than having dairy. Dairy, if they read the China study, they'll understand the work of Dr. Colin Campbell, who was a dairy farmer and found that the protein in dairy, the casomorphins were carcinogenic. So it's hard because of the casomorphine. So my understanding from Dr. Barnard's work is that casein is the dairy protein, and nature put in the breast milk of all species this kind of like sedative type compound so that when the infant would nurse, they would want to stay close to the breast, never intending that we were going to drink milk or dairy products after maturity, particularly from another species. And so there is an addictive like component. Like you can have vegan cheese now. Miyoko Shinner makes every kind of cheese vegan, and it's delicious, but you're not going to get high in your brain the way you do when you eat these actual dairy products. And so maybe when people understand that this is a true addictive like process, these casomorphins, I don't know if it's going to make it easier, but they'll have more understanding. And then, you know, just telling them how much, you know, blood, urine, and feces are in the dairy products, at least in the United States, how many parts per million, that sometimes turns people off a little bit. If they're coming to it from an ethical reason, dairy cows suffer more than any other creature, probably they're being raped while they're still nursing and their baby. I mean, it's just the most, you know, remember Julia Child even said later in life, you know, I could never support this cruel industry, the veal industry. But what industry do you think you're supporting if you're drinking milk? Where do you think the boys go? You know, they don't become dairy cows. So yeah, that's why I think it's important that if they don't initially come to it for the ethical reason, I think it's important that they're exposed to it, because it's very easy to have a health challenge, reverse it with a plant-based diet and say, okay, I'm better now, so I may as well go back to having a little of this. You know, if you have that ethical piece in place, you're never going to go back to eating animals, unless maybe you're on a desert island and that's all they drop from the helicopter. If you have that ethical piece in place, you're not going to go back to eating animals.
Yeah, exactly.
I 100% agree, because my husband and I, you know, we really try to stay whole food plant-based, but we tend to go off the vegan junk food route every now and then. But you know, the only thing that keeps us at least in the vegan path is the ethical reason. So even though we might not eat the healthiest things all the time, we definitely at least steer clear of the you know, at least the non-vegan things for those ethical reasons. So yeah, that's so true. The why that makes you cry, I love that. Yeah. As a health coach, I did kind of a week group to kind of get people kind of a plant-based kickoff. And that was definitely something that we focused on, was just knowing your why. And when you can kind of establish your why, the how will come. You know, you'll figure out how to cook without oil. You'll figure out all these things that need to happen if you have that why really well established in your brain. Not because somebody else is telling you or this, that. It's your reason that you're doing this. So yeah, I love that. I love that quote.
Exactly. That's all the questions I have. I really appreciate you coming on. It was a lot of fun.
Well, thank you, and congratulations, not just on losing the weight, but you know, everybody loses weight or can lose weight, but keeping it off.
Well, exactly. As well. How long has it been for you?
Well, I started what I call my ultimate weight loss journey on January 2nd, 2012. So it's been 8.5 years, and I've never felt better. I've never felt that I've looked better.
When I started.
Yeah.
Oh. Weight loss buddies.
Yeah, exactly. And, maybe sometime in the future we could have a discussion on the anorexia if you're up to it, because my sister, she sadly passed away from it years ago.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, that's That is
That's another whole topic.
it's a tough one, those eating disorders. If we only knew what we knew now, then we could have helped so many more people.
Exactly.
But going forward, we're still helping a lot of people. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you again.
my pleasure. Thank you for interviewing me. Been so nice.
All right. Can't wait for your book to come out. I'm
Yeah, me too. I'll
craving
check
some of
it
those
out.
desserts already.
Great. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Chef AJ.
Take care.
Take care.